Okay, we're going to demo a sheer curtain. Bonus, this is as the light was shining through it because I'm working on the project too. So I have already kind of the box and sill of my curtain or of my window figured out, and I do want to figure out most of what's going on behind my sheer curtains because you will be able to see it. It might be a little obscured, but there will at least be parts of it that you can see. I am sharpening my pencil down to a nice point. And I have this sill that I quite like. I want to kind of set a plant on it. So I might even just like really quickly sketch in a little sphere that I could just have sitting here on a little tray. Maybe it'll be a kokedama. Are any of you familiar with kokedama? It's a Japanese practice that used to be practiced by the peasantry who could not afford ceramic pots. And it is soil and the root ball of your plant wrapped in moss and then tied with some type of cording so that it just kind of exists in a ball, and the moss creates the vessel that it sits in. And then they're usually set in saucers of water because they dry out quite quickly. So I might just be like, oh, okay, this is going to be a little kokedama plant here, just growing. And then maybe I'll make it trail down here. Maybe it's like a pothos, and the viney plant. Okay, I'll have that sketched in. I'm going to sketch in any sort of, oh gosh, what's it called? On a window where they have like the framing of the panes. Let's see, I have a little bit here for that kind of upper part of the lower frame of glass. And then I'm going to put in, my house has its original 1938 windows, which is cool and sometimes cold. But oh man, I love the panes. My parents' house has a more modern version of that, where that's between two pieces of vacuum sealed glass. And so it's both easier to clean and you get the nice look. Alright, and then I think I'm going to correct this just a little bit while I'm looking at it. And I'm going to decide how I want my curtains to hang. I think I want my curtains to come kind of above the window. Oh, mine there, I don't really like. There we go. So that's actually continuing on up there to a wider point. Now I have that fixed, mostly. When I hang curtains, I like to hang the actual rod like a little bit outside of it. That way if I pull the curtain all the way to the side, I have most of the window open, and the curtain just ends up covering the wall versus the window. That way I can get in the most natural light. So I'm going to think about that when I just put in the indication for my curtain rod. And then I am going to figure out what I want as far as a window treatment. I like a nice, like, evenly folded shade, not necessarily like the little scrunchy ones. So I'm gonna start with drawing just my very first line where how far out I want these curtains to go. And for the purpose of illustrating sheer, I'm going to bring it a little bit in front of the window. I'm going to do that on both sides, coming just inside the final on these curtain rods. And dropping them just to the floor. I'm a little unconventional in my house. They hit slightly off the floor because my registers of my vents are like in my wall. And if I put my curtains there, they just become an additional filter for dust. Because all of the registers are put where radiators probably used to be, which would have been under windows to kind of create that heat element. Okay, now to get the nice curvy look where it kind of comes out and goes back in and out and goes back in, I am going to make a little curve like that, and then from this high point, that's where I'm going to draw my line. I am going to leave this little bit here because this ends up being the back, and where between this point, the front of that curve, and this that is actually going behind. And in a non-sheer fabric, I wouldn't be able to see it. But in a sheer fabric, this ends up being a double thickness of the fabric. And so it ends up essentially being as if you layered two thicknesses together. And so it's slightly more opaque in those areas. So I just give it a little dotted line so that I know it is the line that is behind. And I bring this one up. You don't necessarily have to find this line and bring it all the way to the top every time. Sometimes you can break up the line, which is what I'm going to do on the next piece. So from here, I'm going to do another U to come back out. That tells me where this curtain stops overlapping. And my upside down U to come back in. This time I'm going to break up the line a little bit. As I come up, and I might, one moment, goodness, my allergies have been messing with me today. This might, we might only go like a few more times because I just can't fit that much in. Either that or I'll extend this curtain rod out a little bit so that I can fit one more. So it's just this line where it's U's and then inverting that U to come back again, and you just kind of keep it nice and even. If you have a less even curtain, so for example, if it is just the type that has like a tube channel versus some sort of tab or grommet up here that keeps the pleats even, these might not be this perfect and even. They might change to be more like, I'm going to go so fast here. The bottom of the curtain here might end up being more like uneven. So you don't have to necessarily pay attention to as much of these lines being perfect. I just really like the curtains that have the tabs and keep everything nice and neat. I'm going to draw that up, and then at the top a similar thing happens. I don't have much of the top to illustrate here, but I will do my best to squeeze it in. is you have matching curves at the top of your fabric. So this one comes like that and like that. Okay, so I've extended that out. That's nice. Okay, now I need to do the other side, and I just want to get my lines in first thing. So let's put this here. Just come in a little bit. Okay. And then I want to come out and yeah, I'm just going to have to pull them out a little wider so that I can squeeze in a few more folds so they look bigger. Now I'm going to come in, and especially on the edges, I'm going to give myself a little bit of a thicker line. That way I can differentiate anything that is behind from what is in front. Okay. And this is also where if I had any patterning to do on these curtains, I would probably do that. So if I have any, like if I wanted to recreate this little like a leaf pattern, I would do that at this point. I really probably wouldn't even really be able to see that, but I want it in there so that you all can see it. Maybe I am just barely catching it. So now what I can do is I can decide, okay, what in here is a little bit darker? And there's going to be this weird thing. If you have something like a white or cream fabric, anything that is darker here will be a shade or so lighter here because it's being cloaked in that lighter fabric. But anything that would be lighter behind it, when it doubles up, will actually be a little darker. And so I'll start with the sill so that you can see illustrating the sill and any of this sashing and like pane work. And then we'll come in and figure out the areas where I need to give a little bit more shadow to where the fabric overlaps. So let's do the sill and kind of, I'm going to just give, I think I'm just going to put in my lines of graphite this way as though it was wood grain. And where it crosses into the curtain, I'm going to keep it so very light. I honestly might not even go in and do any blending there and just keep just those really, really light, barely there lines. And then I'm going to add in my anything that's down beneath here. So there's a little shadow. It becomes darker where we don't have to see through the curtain. Where we have to see through the curtain, it becomes lighter again. Okay. We end up almost just being able to see what's in here as almost like a shadowed version. Okay. And then just a little bit of this leaf behind everything in front nice and crispy. A lot of times when I'm doing these little details, I actually go back in with my mechanical pencil because I can keep a nice fine line for longer on the mechanical. Mechanical pencils are not great for like laying down graphite to do shading, but they are great for doing those little details because they have such a fine point. All right, now I'm gonna come in. Oh, I want to do this too. Okay, darker. Darker runs to here. And then it's a little lighter behind the curtain. We still want to know it's there, but your line just becomes darker when it's now out in front. And I would say my rendering style tends to be more on the informal side. I tend to go towards a more like cozy lived-in feeling than something nice and commercial. But if commercial work is what you love, you can aim for that more like polished aesthetic. At this point, though, you are welcome to make your own choices as far as aesthetic and design. I do not expect you to follow my own sensibilities. Let's put in a little block here. Okay. And the edge of this window. I'm going to bring in my blending tool now and blend this kind of darker wood that is a little matte. And then I'm just going to maybe just very, very lightly just kind of stroke over these lines. I'm not trying to do a ton of blending because if I really get in there, it's going to darken it too much. I'm going to take whatever is left over on my blending stump plus whatever I can pick up from these lines going back in the area where it overlaps, and I'm going to take extra care to blend that going up. So that'll also happen right here, and I'll take extra care that anything that's behind there, I really give a good little scrub to, because I'm going to see even less of it now that it's through 2 layers of cloth. I switched to my Tertullian here because it's a little softer. And then I'm also going to just blend out these lines a little bit to each side. The middle will still remain the darkest, but it helps me get a little bit of an idea of a shadow here. And then I'll bring in my eraser and highlight along the high point. But going back in space, I'm going to have a little bit of a shadow, not too much. I also need to deal with the fact that light is coming in from this window, And so here, where I don't have any light, I'm going to give a little bit of just like that mid-tone to my curtain. And where there is light, I'm going to leave more of a highlight glowing through that fabric. So after I get the basics, oh, and then also up here, we have these top folds pretty much in darkness. They're not getting much light coming down into them at all. Oh, there we go. So I might even come in here and give it a little bit more on the double fold in the darkness. All right. So the key things to note is that I will still see where the fabric overlaps in those lines. I can, especially with like a little mechanical pencil, come in and add in those fine lines. If you don't have a mechanical pencil, just using your pencil sharpener to get your like 4H nice and pointy is also a good option. And then making sure that I leave a suggestion of what's behind the curtain as well, so that I can still see a little bit of the sashing of the edge of my window frame, anything that happens to fall behind it. If you're having trouble thinking about what it looks like, looking up reference images or taking your own if you have some sheer curtains, and you can kind of arrange them how you want your curtains to be in your image, that's a good option. And then I'll finish out the finales here. I think I kind of want them to mimic the bed. At least in form. And then I really want to just bring down the leg of this bed because it's bothering me. I might fix that later. But that is my going through here. I might also, this is something I picked up from comics, but it can add a nice effect. Just give a little bit of a few lines across a couple of the panes so that it's clear that there's something there. But it's not super like a super aggressive line, just like a little light dash. I like adding that. Oh, and then I have the top of my curtain rod, and I will highlight the center of it because that's the only part that's probably going to get any shine on it, is towards the center to the bottom. To do a delicate highlight like that, I can either use a little eraser like at the end of my mechanical pencil, or I can squeeze this into a nice like wedge shape and then pull it across the bottom to get the highlight. Then I did obliterate this line some, so I'll come back and put it back in. Alright, so yeah, that's sheer. Making sure you pay attention to where fabric overlaps and what's behind it.